Oh, hello there. I realized I didn't do my audio yet. I clicked the button and then I realized I didn't pipe my audio through like I'm supposed to. Hello, welcome to the stream. Before we get started, of course, the Black Friday sale is going on. So for anybody watching live, the one of you, and for those of you who will watch this video later, don't forget to come to infinitypbr.com, see the stuff on sale. RPG character complete, save $174. That's a lot of money. And we've got the lightning deals, and these are all on sale now as well. Game modules bundle, that's what we're dealing with today. In fact, we're going to be making a new demo scene, or not demo scene, a new video, demo video, showing how to set up, what's going on there with the, oh, that's weird. Okay, how to, gosh, geez. All right, how to set up the stats. So I changed some things on the game modules bundle, and if you go to infinitypbr.com and you click on the scripting docs, you'll come to this site, and this is what we're going to be referencing today. I've updated this tremendously with information on the things, and we're redoing this video essentially because enough has changed, quite a bit has changed. It's better now, easier now. It now computes things automatically, auto-magically, I might say. And so that's what we're going to do. So I'm doing a couple things. Since I'm making this video, I also need to record my screen at the same time. Delete that recording. Let's see. Record screen. Yes, we want my voice. Yes, we want computer audio, blah, 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 blah. Record. All right. That way I can, hold on one second. I'll be right back. I had to remind myself how to pause record because I don't want to use up all my disk space while I'm just talking. All right, so let's see. We're gonna do this in the this scene I made. I made the scene just to test it to make sure it works, and then it's for video. I was going to make videos out of it, so that makes sense. What am I doing here? So feel free to ask questions in the chat. Questions always help me as well because in the end I know the system fairly decently, although I'm still going to be referencing the docs just to make sure I don't say the wrong thing and whatnot. So I'm actually going to delete these demo scenes and demo files. What is this? This old one. Probably should delete that. Old loot box manager. I named it old, probably to remind myself to delete it, and I didn't delete it. What's this? A problem. Oh, I see. It's missing the demo delete only. Okay. Is missing the demo items that go into it. So, all right, so we're going to bring this down here. And we'll bring the console down here. And I'm going to create a new scene. We're going to create a folder. Video scenes. Create a new one. Where's the scene? Scene. Call it stats. All right. Don't save that one. All right, so we're going to create new stats. Let me go here. And let me go to the asset store to start this video off. All right. Hey there, welcome to the demo. Well, let me just reject all this. Ha. Hey there. Hey there, welcome to the demo scene for the stats module. And this is basically a tutorial where I'm going to be setting up the stats from scratch so you can see how to do it yourself. Now on the asset store page here, there is a link, of course, to our scripting documentation right here. And this will go through all the things that I'm going to go through in this video if you prefer to read along rather than watching. All right, so I've created a new scene just called stats here, and I'm going to create a new folder as well. I'm going to call this stats. So we're assuming that you're setting up some sort of game that requires stats, skills, and other things. And so that's what the system does. It creates and manages the data and makes it more easy to have complex links and references between that data so that they can all affect each other. And that includes items, using the items module as well, so that when a player equips something, perhaps their stats change, or in a situation where your items are buffs or modifications, then that can affect the stats as well. Stats can be, of course, anything. And so we're going to start by creating a few here. You could go and create game modules, create, and stat. And I'm going to call this one gold, and that's going to be our gold. Fair enough. And experience. I'm just duplicating these. I'm also going to create one called experience mod, and we'll get into that, what that is later. And then I'm going to create one called strength. I'll spell it right. Strength. Maybe I'll spell it right. Strength, and then we'll call one that's magic, and then we'll call one that's hit points, and we'll do hit points max. All right, and then that's it for now. We'll start with these ones. And now we see this red arrow up here. That's because each one of these scriptable objects needs to have its own unique ID. So since I duplicated that, they now have all the same unique ID, and that's not cool. We can't have that. And so I'm just going to click this button, and that'll create a new unique ID for each one of these that I've created. We're going to keep doing that until they're all done. All right, so now let's set up this data. Let's bring this over and bring this over, make it a little bit wider. Here we go. So again, reference the scripting docs. There's a lot here. It's fairly straightforward once you wrap your head around it, but there is a lot going on. The scripting docs will have a lot of stuff about the scripts themselves. I'll bring this out a little bit, about how things work, about the key concepts of how the final value of a stat is put together. So I'm just going to go through this now, and we're going to set up these stats. So for each one of these, we have some main settings, stats, and dictionaries. So let's just start with the main settings. I'm going to look at gold, and I'm going to say, well, gold can't be trained. What does that mean, trained? Well, if something can be trained, like a skill, then you can make it better throughout the game. So actually, let me create a skill right now. So I'm going to create another one. Game modules, create skill, stat, not a skill. And we're going to call this sword skill. So this is going to be called sword. And actually, I'm going to create a new folder for this. I'm going to call this skills. And then I'm going to move sword into skills. And I'll tell you why. Because if we now click on sword, you'll see that it says it's a skills. That's the object type. The object type for any of these scriptable objects is going to be the folder that is its parent. So all of these are going to be type of stats, and these object type is going to be skills. So let's hide the full inspector. So this one can be trained. That means that we need a mastery levels. What is a mastery levels? Well, those are the different levels that you might have. So I'm going to do for this one a novice, expert, and master. So 3 levels that your player can go through. So again, create a new folder just to keep things organized. And I'm going to call this mastery levels. Now I might have more in the game, but right now we're only going to have 1. Maybe your game only has 1. A lot of games might have only 1, might have none as well. We're going to call this main mastery levels. And that's all this is here. You can't actually edit the mastery levels on the scriptable object. You have to click this manage mastery levels and you get this window. I'm going to dock that up there. We have 2 options, mastery levels and dictionaries. For this, I'm not going to use the dictionaries. If you're using the dictionaries module, if you've used that before, you can add just a whole bunch of different key value pairs and lists of values. But we're not going to use that for this. Instead, I'm going to add a few things. Master is already there, so I'm going to type master, expert, and novice. Now, whoops, add that. Now you see they actually loaded down here, which is nice. The other thing is, as it says here, the least proficient should be on top. And so I'm just going to click this to make novice, expert, master. Now they're listed there. And now we have our 3 levels right there. That's all we have to do to set up the mastery levels. So now if I go back to my skills and click on sword, now when we click on our mastery levels, we see we have novice, expert, and master. Now there is only 1 mastery level, so that's already selected. But if there were more, then you could select that. And every object, stat or skill object, every stat object of this type will be the same mastery level. That's always going to be the case. So we'll get back to this and what this does in a second. Currently, there are no modifiable stats. So let's go create some. If we look at the rest, just to finish the saying up, we're not, our sword skill, yes, we want it to be modified. That means other things can modify it. So other stats might be able to modify sword, other items and buffs and mods, anything that uses the items module. The items module itself, it's going to be another video for that, so definitely check that out. But there are things, item objects, item attributes, those 2 things can affect stats as well. And if something, a stat, can be modified, then any of those things can modify the final value of the stat or skill, in this case the sword. So we want that on. And for this one, I'm going to start the points at 1. And it's not going to be modified by any proficiency. That's a feature we'll get to when we do the experience. So let's quickly talk about what points, base value, and base proficiency are. And again, just a reminder, these are all mentioned right here in the, well, somewhere in here in the documentation. So definitely check that out. Points are intended to be user assigned. So these are going to be things like skill points. In that, for this demo, we'll assume that the player starts, if they have the skill sword, they start with 1 point assigned to it. Other things, like if we look at experience, it's going to start at 0. We have no experience points. We have no gold, so that's going to start at 0. Hit points, maybe we start with hit points. I'm just going to start with, say, 30 for now, and we'll start with 30 max as well. Now, this is something that we're probably going to end up coding in the end. In fact, I actually want to start this one off at 0 because other things will go into the hit points max. But maybe your magic and strength both start off at 10. So these are user assigned. During the game, these are things that users can add and remove from. So if you've got gold, you can add gold. You can remove gold. But this is not something that the other stats are going to directly affect outside of actions the players take. All right. And so the other two things are base value and base proficiency. Base value is something that does get modified by other stats and items. And the proficiency as well. And so these two are modifiable by other things where points technically isn't. Although, of course, you could code that so it is, but that's completely up to you. What goes into a final stat? Well, it's going to be the points plus the base value multiplied by 1 plus the base proficiency. Now this algorithm is pasted right here. We have points and base value plus all the modifiers to that base value. So other stats, item objects, item attributes, all those things that might modify this stat will all be put together, just added together to make the final base value. And then you also have the base proficiency, which is here, plus all the modifiers to the proficiency. It's the final proficiency. And the final stat's going to be that final base times 1 plus the proficiency. So if a proficiency is 0, that means the raw number is it. But if proficiency is 0.1, that means it's going to be a 10% boost to the final stat. That's all that means. And then the other things that we have here are the min and max. For this, I'm going to set a minimum of 1 so that you can't go below 1. There's no maximum. And we're going to round to a whole number. So I'm going to just do round. In my project, it's only going to be 1 ever. So I'm just going to say floor. So we don't have to worry about anything else. If anything gives a little extra, then it will always go to the floor. Even if it's 1.9, it'll have to get to 2 before it actually shows 2. All right, so let's look at these other stats and we'll get these set up as well. Let's see. So we're going to start with gold. Gold cannot be trained and cannot be modified. In fact, I'm going to show another way of looking at this. If we click this manage stats, that opens a new window as well. And I'm going to dock that. I'm going to try to dock that. All right, maybe I'm not going to dock that yet. I'm going to try to dock this up there. There we go. And now we can choose different types here. So again, the object type is going to be the parent directory name. So we now have our skills, which is really only sword, and we have our stats, which are all of these. So this is another way of modifying all of these in a different view. So we're going to go down the list here. Experience mod can't be trained, but it can be modified. And experience can't be trained or modified. That's just a value that just is the way it is. Other things will modify it. In fact, this experience mod will play a role, but that's that. Gold cannot be trained, cannot be modified. Hit points max can't be trained, and it can be modified. Hit points cannot. And magic, we're going to say it can be modified just like strength. And those will be our, where would you say, basic attack for magic and attack for strength. Nothing fancy in this demo. For the starting values, experience mod 0, 0, 0, 0. We'll start this at the 30, but really in a real project, we'd probably start with whatever hit points max is, and we'll start those off at 10. Do we need minimum for mod? No, we don't, and we will round to 1 integer. And for experience, yes, it's going to be a minimum of 0, and for rounding, we will round to the floor. Gold, again, yes, 0, round to the floor, and hit points max. yes, you can have to have at least 1 hit point max, and there is no maximum, but we will again round to the floor. Hit points, yes, 0. You're dead if it's 0. I think I need to add a new feature to say that the max could be another attribute, or another stat rather. That would be neat. I'll have to do that. And again, we'll make this floor. Actually, for this one, we're just going to round it to 1 decimal point. That way you can have half a point left. For magic and strength, again, magic, we'll just set these to be a minimum of 1. And we'll do floor for each of those as well. Pretty simple so far. And then I want to talk about this other feature, this modified by this proficiency. So this allows me to drag in experience mod. So now whenever I run the method, there's a method on the game stats script. Again, if you didn't get it earlier, the methods are all right here. So on the game stat list, there is a method here, modifying points, to just say, hey, game stat, add points, points to add. Now, what this does is it adds whatever points you give in, and unless you say false, which you can add in false so that it doesn't do this, you will add the points multiplied by the final proficiency of this value. So that means that if experience mod, if that final proficiency is 0.25, that means that if I give 100 gold, or 100 experience rather, the player will actually get 125 experience because it's being modified by the final proficiency of experience mod. So that means there's things in the game that can affect the experience mod, like a learning skill, for instance, or a item that has a buff on it that gives you more experience, or a spell that for the next 5 minutes you get an extra 10% experience. Or many games do the thing where if you're fully rested, you get more experience. So whether you're fully rested itself can be a stat that the game keeps track of. And if that stat is above a certain amount, then it can do a certain thing. So there's a lot that can go on there. All right, so let's see what's next. So now that we have our experience, every time we add experience there, it will be modified by that. Excellent. What else are we going to do? These are some great stats. And I guess what we need to do is figure out things like damage, right? Because that's a nice stat to have. So we're going to do a new stat. In fact, I'm just going to copy this one, and we'll call this one physical damage. And we're going to create a new UID there. This one's going to start at 0, minimum of 1 damage, no maximum. It can be modified. And then we're going to do another one called magical damage. Create a new UID there. So how do we compute what the physical damage is? Now, your game's different from every other game. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you're copying some other game's algorithms, which is perfectly fine. I don't mind. But every game is different. And the whole point of the stats system and the game modules entirely is that your game can be unique and you don't have to change how you want your game to operate in order to use the system. So we're going to figure out what the physical and magical damage is going to be. Now, I'm making this on the fly. I don't have a script. I'm just making it up as I go along. But we want to be able to cause damage to a bad guy. And so we have our physical damage. Let's look at stats. So stats has the ability, this is where you make the connections between this stat, physical damage, and other stats. Now, rather than saying up what will modify this, it goes the other direction. We're going to start by taking what will modify this and adding this to that. So for physical damage, strength might play a role. So let's say that if we load up our strength, we can then select a stat, physical damage, add that there. And you can see that there's a few options now. There is a base, value, and proficiency, and a per skill point value in proficiency. Now this is the target and the sources. There's always base and always per skill point. Those, you can't get rid of them. You can have them set to 0 and then they have 0 effect, but they're always there. Whereas these sources from other stats, you can get rid of if you want to. So strength is going to help physical damage. Now, I don't know. Yes, we are making it up as we go along. Now, for those watching the video, if I forget to delete certain parts of the video, it's because I'm talking to people live on the YouTube. So if you enjoy watching game development live, subscribe to my YouTube and you can do so. So I don't know what your game says for strength and how that affects damage, but we can do something pretty simple here. And we can say that every 1 strength you have equals 1 damage. That's pretty straightforward. So instead of base, we're going to we need the final value of strength. So I'm going to add in strength as the other source. And we're going to say 1 times the final stat. So what's the difference between all 3 of these? This is a great example here. Base means this will just have the effect. So if I put 5 here, it means that since I have both physical damage and strength as a stat, or if I have both, then I will get +5 to physical damage, or to proficiency if I put that in. That's just a straight value. If you do per skill point, it's going to multiply this value by the number of points in strength. So for stats that might go up every time you increase your skill points, you assign a new point to that skill perhaps, then this is how you scale that by that value, by that skill point value. But in this case, I want it to be a 1-to-1 thing. So whatever, if I have 10 strength, I'm going to have an extra 10 physical damage. Straight up, that's what I want it to be. And so now I've added strength as a source, and these are all optional. You can delete them, you can add them, and you can add any number of them. Can you add 2 of the same? You can't add 2 of the same. C'est la vie. And then in strength as a source, you have your options here between raw, which is basically the same as base, points, same as per skill point, and proficiency, which is going to multiply the values here by the proficiency in strength, the final stat, which is what we're going to be using for this. You also have these effects, no effect, of course, and then also x times the value of and x times value. That's getting to the lookup tables, which I don't know if I really want to talk about those in this, but I might as well. So let's talk about lookup tables. We'll cover everything in this video. So game modules, create lookup table. A lookup table is literally just a stat lookup table. It's just numbers. And what we're going to say is input 0 equals output -5. And we're going to do a whole bunch of these. Input 1, output negative. Actually, we'll put input 2, output -4. 4, -3. And you see the pattern forming probably 8, -1, 10, whoops, 0. Do you see the pattern? You know those videos on YouTube that are talking about like IQ puzzles that only geniuses can figure out, but then you watch it and they're all really easy? Not because I'm a genius, but because they want you to feel like you're a genius, and so they make them really easy, and then you're like, oh my god, I'm so smart, and then you share it to show everyone how smart you were. All right, so lookup table is going to basically take in an input and give you an output. So in some projects, you might want your stats to scale differently than their raw numbers. So the stat could be, 10, and your output would be 0. Maybe that's the bonus value. And if your stats are too low, you actually get a negative bonus. And then 20, your bonus is only 5. Now in this project, I'm going for a 1-to-1 thing, so I'm not going to use this, but I did want to show this to you so that you can see how you can use a lookup table in different ways to modify the stats in even more ways. So in that case, if I want to say lookup value in stat lookup table, now that I've got a lookup table, it shows up here, then I could say, okay, whatever the final value of strength is, the output, the amount that physical damage is going to be given will be X times that value. So I could say 3 times the lookup value in the stats lookup table. So now my strength is 10, let's say, and the lookup table will spit out 0. So the final physical damage would be 0. 3 times 0 is 0. But if this spat out 1 as the output, that would be 3 times 1. If it spat out 5, 3 times 5, 15. So that's one way of doing it. But for this one, and I guess I should also say that here you can also have strength times the values here times the lookup value of, well, actually, let me restate that. It's the values here multiplied by the lookup value of something else, so maybe sword, in stats lookup table, if you have strength. So now this might be, I know this is strength and strength, so of course you have strength, but let's say that there's some other stat that players don't necessarily have right away, but if they did have it, then it would take into effect and have an effect on physical damage. So there's many ways to link up this data, but we're going to go with the final stat and just say 1-to-1, one value for every final stat of strength added to physical damage. That's all we're going to do there. And then for magic, we're going to do something similar. So we're going to add magical damage, and we will do magic, add that, final stat, and 1. So 1 magical damage for every magic stat. Pretty simple there. All right. And so, yeah, I think that's good. I'm going to take a pause for myself here real quick and make sure I'm covered the bases I want to cover so far. This is probably why other people write scripts, but I said, fuck it, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. Okay. Yeah, let me read the chats here. Yes, I'm making a tutorial video. Okay, let's see. Jason's videos are much more polished than mine. Okay, but let's say we want a little something extra that the player can do. Oh, thank you for subscribing, Daniel Myers. Let's say we want something else that the player can do in order to increase their physical damage even more. Now we're, of course, later going to add weapons, so that will add to their damage. But let's say that we want some skill that they can learn. So I'm going to create a new skill here. I'll copy sword, just duplicate it, and then we're going to call this, what will we call this? Fighting. We'll just call it the fighter skill. It can be trained, it can be modified. Excellent. So let me create a new UID. So this is where the mastery levels come into play. Anything that can be trained will have mastery levels. It's true. I've turned off night mode for this window. I have not for this. So it might start fading. But for this window, it's not on. So anything that can be trained will have the different modification levels you set up in your mastery levels objects. So in this case, novice, expert, and master. And that means that as they get better at the skill, the effects can change as well. So let's add some effects here. As a fighter, you're going to get more physical damage. But let's say that you're also going to get more hit points. So fighters can also level up their hit points as you go along. That's cool. So what does this mean? Let's say that, as a fighter, you get an extra 10% boost to your damage. And so we're going to put this as 0.09 and 0.01. At one skill point, where fighter is going to start at one skill point, this means that they'll get a 1% boost per skill point plus a base 9% boost. So you combine the two, 9 plus 1 is 10%. That's right. So 10% boost to physical damage. And then for hit points max, we're going to do kind of the opposite. We're going to say 10 hit points. So not proficiency, but just 10 straight points to their hit points for this character having the fighter skill. So that's that. And then we can add something else too. Let's say that we've got this sword skill. It's another skill. They're all stats in this system, but we're treating them as skills. So I'm going to add sword. Actually, no, not sword there. I'm going to add sword here as another one. And we're going to add another proficiency boost to sword, so that now sword is going to be more proficient as well, in the same vein as physical damage. Although I guess that would be kind of counterintuitive, because sword's going to change physical damage as well. So we'll just X that and remove it. So what does that mean for expert and master? Well, I'm going to copy this, go over here and just paste that in here, and we're going to up the values for each of these. So I'm going to paste it in master as well. So now when you're an expert, instead of 10% as base, you're going to get 18%. So we're going to make that, or 20% rather, make that a total of 20. And we'll double this as well, make that 18 and 2. And then for master, we'll make it triple. So that means as you advance and give your character more skill points in the skill, you're going to get even more benefit out of it. For every skill point you give it, you're going to get an extra 3 hit points and an extra 3% to your physical damage if you're at master level. So now you've got these motivations to get better at the fighter skill. And what we can do is very similar. We can just duplicate this and call this caster and make a magic one, where instead of physical damage, we do magical damage. And you know what? We don't have magic points. We need magic points. So let's go here. We'll just duplicate this and say magic points max. And of course, we're going to create a new UID on the new one, just in case you're already using the UID in your game, and you're adding new stats later on, which I'm sure many of you will do way after you started the game. You add new stats. So always create the new UID on the new object, not the old. So now I'm going to go back to our skills here, and we have this caster skill. I can add magic points max and magical damage. And we're just going to copy these over. Magic points max and magic points damage. And then I'm going to delete these. We'll copy this. Go back to our expert here, and we're going to append the structure only. So when we append the structure, instead of pasting the modification list, which replaces it, the appending structure will just add the new stuff, but it won't delete anything. So there's just multiple ways to paste. Now in this case, we actually would have been perfectly fine to have replaced it. Ooh, not 274. But I wanted to show that functionality in the video. Now again, if you are, okay, magic point max is going to be 18 and 2 and 0.18 and 0.02 there. So if you are following along at home, you should be following along with the documentation if you'd like as well on setting all this stuff up. I'm basically going through all of this, but on the video instead. Great, so now we've got this, and we can see down here that what this directly affects, what the caster directly affects, which is the first level, and what it affects, which includes the first level and any other level. And then if you go to your stats here, and you can see hit magic points max is affected by caster. Physical damage is affected by fighter and strength directly. So you can kind of see how these make up. So let's see, what's next? It's a good question. What is next? Okay, I think what we'll do is we'll set these to 30 each. Okay, maybe I'll make magic points 20. All right. I guess the next step is to create a demo scene for it, where we just have very basic buttons that Jason Storey won't like looking at in order to click the buttons and see the results. So now I'm going to create the scripts for that. And it will be very basic. So we're going to create an empty up. We're going to call this demo player and add a demo player script. Very simple. All right. So now we're going to create a demo player just so we can see the stats in action in an actual scene. So I'm going to refer back to the list here and see that there is a difference between game stat and game stat. That's a very important concept, because stats themselves are scriptable objects. You don't want to modify those at runtime. That wouldn't be a good thing. So during runtime, you're going to have game stats, and game stats are game versions of the stats, which will link themselves to the stat object and also provide some additional methods in order to do fancy things. And so there's a lot of information about game stats here. I'm going to utilize these in this demo. I just want to point out that it's the docs on the Infinity PBR docs have a lot here. So let's start by creating a game stat list. Now this is a list of game stats. It has a few other methods to it, but it basically will be our main repository or player repository for stats and skills. So let's start here. And we will have to remember to include our modules in the using statements. So we're going to create two of these, one for our stats and one for our skills. And I'm going to give myself a list of stats that I want to be required at the start whenever I create this player. So these are just going to be required stats that I know every player is going to need. And so I'm going to make just a public list, and we'll call this, well, these are going to be stat objects, just lists of the scriptable objects, and we required skill stats. Oops. And I'm also going to give myself a header here that say required, just to remind myself that these are required in the inspector. And then on start, I'm going to have a method that says populate stats, or required stats. So we'll create that. And delete that. All right, so let's see what stats are required once this compiles into Unity. So our required stats, we're going to make sure we have all of these. So experience mods required, experience gold. Pretty much all of these are going to be required, but there might be some that are not required. I'm sure in your game you're going to have plenty of stats that the player does not start with. But in this case, we do want to start with all of these, but we're not going to start with any of these skills yet. Those ones are going to be learned during the game. All right, so then we've got our required stats. And so now on start here, we're just going to go through the stats, required stats, and add them to the stats list. So again, the methods are on the documentation. And so let's start by first checking to see if we already have the stat. If we have the stat, we don't want to add it again. But there's actually a couple ways of doing that. One is to go to stats.has or wasn't there a has? Contains. See, I need to remember. So we could say if stats.contains and add in the required, well, we have to do each one. So we're going to do this. We're going to start by saying for each, I'm going to have to redo the voiceover, by the way. For each stat in required stats, we're going to say, we could say, if stats.contains stat.uid, then continue. So that's one way of doing it. We'll skip it if it already contains it, but we can also just say stats.add stat.uid, and then there's a few other options here. By default, we can say distinct equals true. I forgot something. I have stats. So before we do that, let me go back. So one important step that I actually forgot a second ago is that this needs to implement I have stats. It's a very important section here. Oops. So once we do that, we've got some methods that are required here. So we're just going to insert all of those. We don't necessarily need to use all of these, but in most cases, you will want to have versions of these. For instance, we don't necessarily need has stats, but we are probably going to use gain stat and remove stat for the demo scene. So we can add a stat to the list by saying for each stat in required stats, we can say stats.add stat.uid. And if we look at this here, we need to pass in the new owner. That's going to be this demo player. And also, optionally, whether we want it to be distinct. Now, just by default, distinct is true, so we won't need to change that because I do want it to be distinct. If we already have the stat, we're not going to add it again. So we're going to leave that to be distinct by default, but we're going to pass in this as the new owner. So I'll just skinny that up a little bit. So this will, out of start, make sure that all of our required stats are populated. Now, if you already have a game in action, you can add more stats to the required stats list that you create later in the process, and that will be added to this as well. So it's a great way to always make sure the players have the right stats that you need. All right, what's the next step? The next step is to create the UI. And yes, Jason, it's going to be ugly. I apologize in advance. Sneezed and spilled some water. Once I was going to sneeze while holding a cup of hot coffee, and I thought to myself, ooh, I can make it, I can make it, I can put it down. And I went to put it down, but my hand went down, but the coffee cup didn't go down. Like it was still flowing like a centimeter. And I sneezed and the coffee spilled. So that stinks. All right, so we're going to create some, I'm not going to, in fact, let me pause the recording for now because I don't need to show the creation of this. UI canvas and create panel, and we'll make it a dark gray. Solid, remove this, so it's just solid gray. Maybe we'll make it slightly different. Yeah, a little bit lighter. And then create panel. And we'll call this stats. I'm not used to this version of Unity. Everything's in different places now. And we'll stretch and stay to the side. Actually, let's just stay the top left. And then we will create UI. Oh, interesting. The things I'm used to are legacy now. I'm gonna have to get used to TextMesh Pro. I've never actually used TextMesh Pro, you know that? You're learning a lot about me tonight. Uh-oh. Okay, good. All right, we're gonna call this hit points. And how come I don't see it? Do I need to choose a font? I don't have a font. Font size -99. Oh man. Well, this isn't what I wanted to do. I didn't want to have to learn how to use TextMesh Pro. How come there's no fonts? Oh, there's one. All right, Arial. Why can't I use Arial? Do I have to create a font asset for this? My gosh. Create, where's TextMesh Pro? Font asset. Create TextMesh Pro font asset. Am I missing something entirely? Create TextMesh Pro font asset. Double click what? Nope. Clearly can't create a font asset. Font file must be selected in order to create a font asset. Okay. God damn it. I can't get to a font here. I can't find the font. Fonts. Okay, we're gonna find a font real quick. We're gonna use a cool one. Fantasy. No, that's not what we want. Fantasy. Final Fantasy font. Copyright infringement. Here we go. I'm going to use this one. All right, we'll download that one. All right, I'll be right back. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. Create font asset. God damn it. So annoying. I'm sure TextMS Pro looks much nicer than the old text. I know it does actually, but what? This is draining me. Do I seriously have to drag this over to every single... I don't even... No save button. Buttons don't work. Don't know why. You'll explain it in a voice. Oh, look at you. Hello.
Hello.
All right.
Having difficulties, are we?
What's that?
Having difficulties?
Oh my gosh. All I want to do is make this long-winded video that I then have to edit down later.
Okay, so let me give you a primer on TextMess Pro. Obviously, you haven't used it yet, so I imagine It's a bit confusing. So the main difference is between TextMess Pro and previous stuff is the whole font atlas thing. So as you know from texture atlases anyway, it's a very similar process. Fonts are... It's costly to constantly generate shapes from fonts. And so what you want to do is you want to take an existing font, effectively type out all the characters from that font you actually need, bake it into a texture, and now you're just rendering the texture. So that's the far more efficient, blah, 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 better performance, and you can then choose the resolutions and all that. So that's in general, every font has a font asset that's the actual thing you care about. So you use a font to generate an atlas, and then once you have the SDF font atlas, which stands for signed, what is it? Signed distance field? Signed distance field. Either way, effectively what you want to do is find the font, like you probably have already, right click on it, and then click create text asset from it. And then from that point, you just drag that SDF into that slot into the text object. And that should be it. Literally, drop font in, right-click font, create asset, drag asset into the text field.
Okay, yeah, but what about the step with the no reference exception? What about that step?
Well, it's going to depend on what fonts you're using, right? So if you're going to have trouble if you try to grab rando fonts off the internet, which haven't been built correctly for the stuff you're trying to use. Your best bet is Google Fonts. Google Fonts have a plethora of amazing fonts that are all royalty-free and open source and are there for you to use. Right. I specifically like using Lato for clarity, but like there's fancier fonts there too. So in general, like just go to Google Fonts and pick something there. Ignore random stuff.
But the random stuff looked cool.
Well, random stuff gives you nulls.
Apparently. Although that's something that to consider because Well,
no, there are ways to do it, but the problem you're probably coming across, I haven't looked into it exactly, is most likely that font set doesn't include the full set of characters. And if that's the case, then it can't create the atlas you've asked for. So you would have to go in and actively choose a subset of characters that match the characters existing in the font. Like, for example, there are fonts that don't have numbers in them. Therefore, how does it know how to create a correct atlas if there are literally no numbers included in the font?
Okay, well, I've selected like Oswald.
Oswald is nice. So if you just click download family in the top right.
Oh, I downloaded already. See, you're seeing the delay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I am. Yes, you just need to drag any one of those in. It doesn't matter. Like it only is a TTF in this one. Okay. Well, sometimes I have more than one, and that'll generate nicely, and you can use it. And then just one note, because it will confuse you later, is the SDF that you create from this now is treated the same as a material. It has properties on it that if you change those properties will propagate to all instances of that. But you can have multiple variants of it. So there are like options later on where you can have stylized fonts, which is something you'll get out of this that you didn't have with your original text thing. Is you've got lots of nice options for drop shadows and outlines and all that, and then you can make different templated versions of those basically, or material presets as they call them, and then you can just swap out the material presets. So you can have the header ones versus the other ones, and so on.
So I'm sharing my screen now because I'm still getting the same. No reference, and
interesting.
I know that's where I'm like, come on.
Well, then you've probably broken something.
No, exactly. That's
here's one thing. I don't. Again, this is probably because a new one. I haven't looked exactly what's included. Try. So did you? Because I guess the normal thing is normally when you create your first TextMesh Pro element, it pops up a message and asks you to import a bunch of stuff. Now, maybe they've changed it in the new version, but usually you're supposed to do a bunch of importing. If you just go right-click TextMesh Pro in your UI, it should ask you to import various different assets and things. Failing that, we can literally pull in the default ones and give you the default Liberation font.
No, it didn't give me anything.
Okay, so just go to the back and go to TextMesh Pro. I'm sure that it's still there, even if it's for this one.
Yeah, if you don't have the default font, you have to install like the extra.
Yeah, the asset stuff.
Oh, you mean from Package Manager?
Look up in the window menu. Look at Package Manager. I think it's there. I think there's a button on the TextMesh Pro pane for the package.
There is. It'll be examples. Yeah, you can install all of the extras from there.
I have to say, I'm disappointed in Unity on this one, because if they're going to remove the other stuff and replace it with something that requires you to learn.
Well, what was interesting is the old, like literally previously, in any prior version of Unity, I guarantee you would just right-click, create TextMesh Pro, pops up a message, you click import, and then it just works. It was working perfectly fine there. I don't know what the context is here, why it's not working in this one. Maybe they need some change.
Nope, that's not what I want.
You can't see the package manager window, by the way. You're sharing.
You can't. Well, there's nothing. There's no examples available. It just has let's see. Let's dock that there. Now you can see it. It's just got documentation, changelog, licenses. Let me refresh just in case. Nope.
See if there's a menu like if there's a text like under assets or something. See if it stuck a new menu in there somewhere, like a TextMex Pro menu.
Yeah. Are you able to see these?
Yeah, but it's like the stream is 30 seconds delayed or something.
Oh,
no, on the share. If you right click his name and see it, you can see the share there watching. Yeah.
Okay. Essential resources. This better not throw more errors. All right.
So there's probably one, unless they've changed the default. There's one called Liberation Sans.
There it is.
Default font. Here we go. That'll just work as a default font. And if that's broken, then your project broken, and it's not TextMex Pro's fault, because that one works every time. It's the most default font they have.
All right, let's see. There it is. God damn it. Still mad at Unity for this experience.
Well, for shits and grins, try changing your font now.
Oh man.
Try changing to the font that you
That's a good point, because you know what it is? You have the shaders now. I'm guessing you might have been missing the font shaders. Nope. No, not from there. So delete the one you made, the two you've made there, the SDFs. And now with the extra assets included, right click on one of the fonts and click create. So delete those and then right click and go create font asset.
Oh, yep, that was it.
Yeah, because now you have a material. You didn't have the material before.
Yeah,
interesting.
Because you probably didn't have the shader. The shader is an instance of the material. And a gotcha that I noticed is when you do create versions of a font, if you change the name of the material of the preset and don't leave the prefix all the way out to the SDF, it won't be able to find it anymore, and it will get very confused. It for some reason matches by name when it goes for the font variations. And I dug around for like hours to figure that out.
I learned stuff today. Okay.
Well, it's super fast and it's super good rendering, but it's complicated.
Yeah. And just one last thing that you're going to have to be aware of too is it's got that little yellow box that it uses for wrapping and scale. Yeah. So just keep in mind if you get confused that it's separate from the Unity layout system where it's using all of the anchoring and positioning and stuff. You just have to be aware as well that the yellow box is the one that counts for the word wrapping of the text itself. You might have to do some additional nudging to get that working. And if you want to tweak it, one thing that's quite nice, depending on the context, is if you look at the TextMex Pro settings, there's an option for auto size, and you can literally just set a min and max font size, and then as you scale that shape around, so if you hit the checkbox there, auto size, and then type in 2 numbers, it'll nicely try and fill it up as large as it can get within the bounds of that shape. So that can be a nice way to fill some of that stuff. Anyway, I'll leave it to it. Good luck. That's it. There you go.
Thanks. Okay. I'm going to leave this, stop my screen sharing, and stop my voice sharing. All right. All right. Well, I don't even remember what I was going to put here. Probably hit points. And then we're going to do magic points. What other stats do I need to show? I'm going to say gold experience. Magical damage and physical damage. Okay. And I know I can use this content fitter, but you know what? I hate those things. They never work right. All of these are going to have to be wider as well. That's weird. It zooms in to a super close area on these. Okay. Okay. I guess it would be better if I started these out with what they are for the demo video, even though I don't really have to do this. Okay, so this is going to be the main stats, and then we're going to go with other stats that are not the main stats, and we're going to call this experience mod, and okay, experience mod, and magic. Ooh. And strength. And we've got our skills: faster, caster, fighter, and sword. So, caster, fighter, and sword. Okay. All right. So I'm going to create some buttons then. Whoa, it zooms in super far. Not used to that. It's okay. I'll get used to it. We're going to say take 6 damage. And we're going to make another one called heal. And we'll say heal 5 damage. Gain 100 experience. Okay. What other buttons do we need? We need toggle sword skill and toggle fighter skill and toggle caster skill. We'll put these down here. Should probably align them with the actual text. Man, I hope you all you Americans had good Thanksgivings. Okay. Really? I didn't know that. Let's try that. Oh. Interesting. This is Jason's sly way of trying to make me make prettier UI. All right. It's true. You know my my triggers. All right. Let's do this. All right, so I've created a very basic UI here just to spit out the numbers so we can kind of visualize our stat system. I haven't done any of the coding, haven't set up any of the anything yet, really. And so let's start by doing that. This is going to be very basic. Obviously, you're likely not going to make your game like this, but the methods used are going to be a one-to-one translation of how you might go about this in your actual project. So on the stats here, I'm going to just have all of these say what they are and then also their value. And so let's just add a script to this. We're at a component called demo UI stat. And we'll create and add that. And then, oops, and we will load that up. All right, so now we have our demo UI stat. And what we want this to do, let me close out my other scripts. What we want this to do is basically say what it is and spit it out. So we need a stat UID. Now remember, all of the stats, since they're scriptable objects, we're going to use the UID to refer to them rather than their name. That way you can more easily pass things around and look them up using the stats repositories, which we haven't talked about quite yet. So I'm going to need a couple things here. We're going to need a public string UID, and we will say public string label, and that's going to be our label there, like hit points, for instance. And on default here, we're going to say that at start we're going to say label equals this dot name. Oops. So just the name of this, and we can get rid of this. So just name. That way, whatever these are named, these objects are named, we're going to call that as the label. All right. And we're also going to need a private stat. And of course, we have to make sure we have our references to Infinity PBR modules. And then on update, we're going to do, and I know this is not, again, the way you would do it in a real project. We just need to spit it out. So we're just going to do an update, not worry about caching the value or only changing it when the value changes or something like that. We're just going to spit it out. So I guess what we can cache, however, is this text. So we will cache that. what's the component called here? Text mesh pro.text. Oh, TM Pro. All right. Hopefully that's right. What do I call it? Demo player. Just call it demo player. I already have the label. Call it UI text. How about that? Oh, that's a bug. That's supposed to be under modules. GameStat is. I'll have to fix that. Ugh, I don't want to do all this. Actually, I don't think we need that. Okay. All right, so I finished setting up my script here, and then on update, we're going to check to make sure the player's set up. If any of these haven't been finished, then we don't want this to come to call, otherwise it will throw a no reference exception. So essentially, we're going to change the text to read that our label and then our final stat. Now that's this player stats, and this is the stat list. Get the UID that we're providing, stat by the UID, and this is going to get the game stat attached to the player. And specifically, it's going to get the final stat of that. And importantly, let's check out that method real quick. Expand this out here. We want to pass in this other levels. This is going to be an important step later on when we have items and other things that can affect the stats but aren't themselves part of the stats system. You don't have to, but if you don't pass anything through, then other things like items won't get passed into it. And so we're going to pass in the other levels, get other levels from the player. The other things are whether we're recomputing the stat or recomputing the entire tree. That includes all the things that affect that stat. By default, they're false. These stats will update themselves automatically so long as you have the auto update turned on true, which is the default. And if we look at our demo player, we can find the required method, get other levels here. And right now, we're just going to return null because we don't have other levels yet. But when we do the items, then we will have other levels. And that's going to be a different video when we explain the items. So we'll just return null for now, but we'll set that up for the future. One more thing we will have to add to our scene is the repository prefabs. So these prefabs, they need to be in all of your scene, will hold all of your stats that you've added, and they'll also help you organize them as well. You know, I need to add to this. I need to add a copy UID button. And at some point, I think for some of you may remember when we're setting this up, there's some code that are supposed to make this update without clicking on it, so that they'll update like on validation and stuff or whatnot. Doesn't seem to be working. It's been causing me some headaches. It's not the worst. It just throws errors if you forget to click them, and it's frustrating when that happens. But anyways, that is a segue. So I need to get the UID of each of these. So I'm just going to click this copy UID. That'll copy it into your clipboard. Then I'm going to paste them into the appropriate fields on all of these stats. Shoot, will it just work? Let's see. Nope. Oh, because these aren't stats. That's right. So let's remove that from these. Shouldn't be 0 though. Shouldn't some of them be basic? Let's see. Demo player. Well, I also need to start at the right hit points. Hello. Good. How about you? Doing well. Tired. Doing well. Well, the best tools I hear, I think, are like Gaia for terrain creation. Definitely costs money because the people who made it, of course, that is their job to make it. But suffice to say, they will save time. Otherwise, on the built-in terrain, just use the built-in terrain system in Unity. Just paint something out. If you're doing a student project, then probably doesn't have to be super fancy. Hit points max are set to 30, so it should be 30. Let's see. I'm gonna put this here for now. Oops. Oh. Oops. I have to implement try get game stat. Well, that's a mental note for me. I should just give people these methods. I mean, it's in the demo that I deleted from this project, but didn't delete it from this project. Let's see. See, this one's much nicer. It's all built out. Oh, wrong one. Alright, but it's still not giving me the right thing. What the heck? Well, clearly my entire script is broken. I don't know why. Let's try something. Oh, I didn't add experience here. Ugh, the button's not changing back. I don't want to set buttons. Well, oh, I know what it is. Tick, 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 tick. And you know what? You know what's crazy? I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And the crazy thing is that I literally say that right here. It's like at the top of the instructions because it's that important. There it is. God damn it. All right, that's good. These are good things for me to know, to remember, because I designed it, so I should remember these things. Oops. There you go. Experience is going up. Hit points, however, is not. Why not? Interesting. Max is 0 from 30 points. Maybe we should start by saying that we are going to recompute. Ah, there it is. I just need to recompute it. It recomputes itself, but it probably doesn't do that until after start. So that's what was going on. I just need to force it to recompute at this point. All right. All right, so I've added a few things to the script here. I've included some references to the stats so I can more easily look up their UIDs without having to hard code the UIDs into this script as well. And then at start, we're going to populate our required stats. Again, that's just adding them all to our game stat list. And then we're going to set the starting points. Now, as the starting points, we're going to go to our game stats list and just call get our hit points and then set points to the hit point max final stat. And since this is the first frame, we need to force it to recompute. So we're going to call true and true to recompute the entire tree for both the hit points max and the magic points max. Later, once the script is running, it's going to auto recompute. But for this purpose, since it is not done that at start, we need to force it to do that. And then we're going to set the stats to dirty just to make sure. This probably isn't necessary, but we're going to do it anyways just to make sure that all of the stats recompute by saying the entire list to dirty. One thing to note also is that in the update, you have to call tick on both of the stats and skills list, and that will call this tick on each of the individual game stats for both stats and skills. This is listed here under the update and late update section on the documentation. And because those objects don't have an update, you have to call this so that you can get the update functionality on those non-mono behaviors. And finally, I've added this code from the try get game stat. This is required for part of the for looking up the stats to make sure that we have the stats in our list. And so I've copied this from the other demos. What we're doing is we're going to look for the first stat from the stats list, and if we don't find that, the skills list, and we're going to return that if we find it. Otherwise, we're going to return null. We're going to return true if we find it. If we don't find it in the stats list, we're going to look for it in the skills list, and we're going to return whether we found it there as well. That just tells and if we do, we're going to return it to the script as well. That was a mouthful. I've also added these methods down here for give experience and give hit points, which is just going to add points to the game stat for experience and hit points respectively, whatever value we pass in. And then in the demo scene, these buttons for take damage, this is going to pass in -6, heal will pass in +5, and 100 experience for give experience when you click that button. So let's go ahead and see this in action. Okay, we can see at start all of our stats are showing up here with some null reference exceptions. Great. Just like what we like to see. All right, so as we can see here, the stats are all showing up as we would expect. And when we click the gain 100 experience, we gain experience. And if we take damage, we take damage. And this shouldn't go down below 0 because we had set a minimum of 0. So even though I'm clicking take 6 damage over and over, it's not going to go below 0. And I can heal 5. Oh, maybe it will go below 0. Oh yeah, what the heck? Interesting. Oh, the final stat won't display below 0. But it will go below 0. Interesting. Is that the logic I want? I think it is. Now you'll notice when we take damage, we take 6 damage and we can heal 5 damage. this displays 0, but technically it's actually going below 0. And so if you can see, I'm taking away 6 and adding 5, so we're only going up to 1, and then this is going up to 0 and then 5. And that's because we've set the hit points to display a minimum of 0, but we're actually adjusting the points so that the points are negative 0, but it's being minimized at the end to only show 0. And so this is a situation that you might want in your game and you might not want in your game. And so this is to fix this. If we want to say that it can hit 0 and it can't go below 0, then we can fix this with our code. And so in our new version of the method, we're going to first add the value to points to get a new float, and then we're going to set points to this new, we're going to set the points to this new value clamped between 0 and hit points max. That and hit points max is derived right up here. That way our hit point value will always stay between those two values. Let's try it out. Oops. So now as we take 6 damage, it goes down, and of course if we heal 5, it goes up, and then it goes down to 6. Now I'm clicking this a bunch of times. Prior, this would be going negative, so let's see if it worked. Sure enough, so now it goes up, and if we keep going up and up and up and up and up, we can't go past 30 because 30 is our maximum hit points. So now we are clamped between those two values, and it doesn't matter how far down we go, we can only go down to 0, and we can only go up to 30. All right, it's getting late. I am tired. I've only recorded an hour. We're gonna stop and save that recording. I'm gonna do this again tomorrow. I'm probably going to do a random live stream for it at some point. But now I'm going to get some water because I am thirsty from all this talking, and then I'm going to play the game New World because it is technically a long weekend and a vacation weekend. So I'm going to play that, and then I'll finish this video tomorrow. It's a very basic thing, but I do want to show, if I may, for those of you who are still here, this is Legend of the Stones, and it's working now with all the game modules, and Well, I should probably start from a new game. I've put the game modules, of course. I dog food everything, and so all of the game modules are now here. I've got my old ones, but I've replaced them with the new ones. And I've got all my item objects and my item attributes, character class, character race. All these are set up with all these fancy things. And this is, I would love to like show this, but I think it would be too daunting for someone who's just looking into it and being like, whoa, what's this? This is the new dictionaries with male names, female names. So now these are our lists. So they're just basically lists, and you can add entries to the lists. We've got all these stats, and we've got some complex stats going on. Some of you might remember from when I was doing the setup for it that, the archer has all these different values on setup, which is just a lot of stuff here, but for their base values, but also all these things. The magic point source is a big one, where magic points max use magic point source times stat bonus, and magic point source is derived from their wisdom right here times 1. So there's lots of stuff there. It's very exciting, actually. We didn't even get the items. Of course, we haven't gotten into that yet. But there's so much to do, so much to see. You have all of them listed here, so you can kind of go through them and see what they are. Anyway, so let me just quickly show it before I get my water and move on with life for tonight. Where's my scenes? Scenes, character creation, new game. Yeah, we'll save. We'll press play. And you know what? Let's maximize on play too. All right. So now we've got our different characters here, and we can, of course, give them more bonus points. This is essentially exactly what I've been saying up in the demo video, just a little fancier. We can change our class. So let's make this a barbarian. She's gonna be a half-orc barbarian. She's gonna be really tough and really strong, but she's not gonna be very nice, so we're gonna remove her personality, and she's not very smart either. But she's got some skills. She's gonna have a chain armor. No reference. What? How much you want to bet? It's the repository issue. God damn it. Well, I was all excited to show this. This was working earlier today. Why isn't it working now? No one knows. Huh. Randomly selected the green hair again. It's not supposed to give a null reference if there's no starring spell. That's weird. Okay, well, I think I know what actually happened. I installed the game modules into this, and I didn't see any errors. But clearly I had made an update to one of the things, and that's what's really going on. Because I need to remember to not change the game module scripts, and I must have done that at some point. because it's supposed to, yeah. So I just need to revert and then go from there, but I'm going to do that another time. Tech Dave, yes, I am extremely happy with the sales of the Black Friday sale. This is our best month ever for Infinity PBR. Aside from the Humble Bundle month, that was the best month ever. This is the type of month that if every month was like this month, I could quit my job and focus full-time on game development and Infinity PBR and do full-time on that, because there would be enough budget to hire a couple more contract artists and still pay my own rent on a monthly basis. But not every month can be a Black Friday month. But hey, this year has been better than last year, and last year was better than the year before. And for a while, it was just floundering. I think when I was selling stuff on my own store, I was shooting myself in the foot, and I didn't realize it, because every time somebody bought from me on my own store, which my best fans, who I consider to be my favorite people, like you, would buy from my store because they wanted to give me a bigger cut of the revenue, and that was cool. Except every time somebody bought from my store, they didn't buy from the asset store, which meant the popularity of the package wouldn't boost up the asset on the listings. So if you go to the asset store, you wouldn't see it at the top, and it eventually went to the point where I was actually going from 100 views a month on average to 15 views per month on average, and that was a problem. And when I stopped selling on my own site a year and a half ago, that actually changed. So now, I know we're in a sale period, but when you go to creatures or something, a lot of my stuff will be further up the list, and so more people will actually see it, and that translates to more new people and more sales. Still nowhere near where I think other publishers are. Malbers, Protofactor, Cinti. I'm sure those folks are, they're full-timers and whatnot, I think, and their libraries are bigger than mine and whatnot. But I'm happy with the sale for sure. And I think I've got another lightning deal coming up soon. Oh, look, Top Down Caves. I have this. I own this. Yeah. So there you go. That's that. So for those of you who have purchased, thank you. And those of you who have purchased in the past, thank you. Definitely go to infinitypbr.com. Click any of these links. They are affiliate links, and I appreciate it if you buy something after clicking my affiliate link, because I get a 5% cut, and that's helpful, even if it's not Infinity PBR stuff. So good to know there. Goblin will be on sale in 4 hours and 30 minutes. Elf character and half orc in a few days, but those are all part of the character complete bundle as well. So if you just want everything without having to worry about all that, then this includes all of this. What? Wait a minute. Apparently I linked to the wrong one on that button. Okay, there we go. This includes all of these main packs and all the bonus packs too. So there you go. Anyways, have a good night. I'm going to go get some water and an adult beverage and play New World. Thanks. See ya.